Hi everyone and welcome to Pro Tools Answers, where three Pro Tools experts demonstrate and elaborate on your Pro Tools questions put to the community in Avid's official Facebook support forum. In this week's episode, we're going to look at a question from Eduardo, and he asks, is there a benefit of using Avid audio interfaces with Pro Tools rather than using one of the other brands? And here to discuss that with me, as always, is Anders Motz at Tonkraftwerk in Austria.
Hello, hello.
And Andy Hagerman, Avid's official training architect over in Tokyo. Hi, Andy.
How you doing?
And of course, myself, Dave. We're hoping that we're helping you understand and get the best out of Pro Tools. So,
let me start by the thing that a lot of people miss and that you might not know about, and which is a really, really important factor. And that is because Avid makes their own interfaces. Clearly, Avid also knows about the round-trip latency of said interface, meaning the time it takes for conversions to take place on the input side and on the output side, which is important when you're recording, but is even more important when you are using external audio gear like a compressor or something like that. If the DAW knows about the latency incurred by this conversion, it can compensate for it, which Pro Tools does automatically without asking you, meaning it's always 100% compensated for any delays caused by any type of conversion, which is a huge thing. And obviously Pro Tools does not make this compensation on any other brand interfaces.
If you aren't in a studio that is using hardware interfaces, hardware inserts, like compressors, external, does that really matter that much? I submit that for studios that are working progressively more in the box, you want an interface with low latency, but the knowledge of that latency by Pro Tools so that it can compensate for hardware inserts is becoming less and less of an issue for smaller facilities that are going increasingly in the box. I'm not saying it's not important. I'm just saying, and I think my biggest point on this question is people don't look at the right things, right? And what you're saying is absolutely 100% correct and probably irrelevant to a good half of the buying public.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. Yeah.
It's crucial to the other half, but irrelevant to the other half. So it's like, what are there good interfaces besides Avid? Yes, is the answer to that question. Are Avids the best? Yes. And no, because we do all these high things. We do things that cater to HDX and HD native facilities, but no, because you're paying for that. So if you want, if budget is your issue, then maybe getting something a little bit less expensive is the way to go. You have to know your own circumstances. My point.
You mentioned here two different platforms, HD native, HDX. We've also got like somewhere in between, which is the Carbon, of course. And HDX and the Carbon has something that no other platform does have, which is the hybrid engine integration, DSP chips. How does that compare to other interfaces that use some kind of DSP, like UAD, Apollo, or something like that?
Well, UAD has their DAW called Luna. And Luna uses DSP built on the hardware in kind of a similar way as Avid does with the Carbon, right? So they're related, but not exactly the same way. I will say, I think that the implementation of a hybrid mix engine inside of Pro Tools is excellent. It's really, really good. And so the Carbon is worth its weight in gold. The other thing, and this is something that a lot of people don't know, is unless something's come up recently, it's the only interface that records in true 32-bit floating point.
For those of you who don't know about the hybrid engine, it's basically two engines running at the same time, meaning that your record-enabled tracks can be in hybrid mode, being executed on the DSP processing on the card, and virtually having no latency while recording, whereas other tracks that are not currently recording can be in native mode, being processed by the CPU of your computer. And this gives you the best of two worlds scenario, where you've got a vast number of tracks, over 2,000 tracks, and you can use 100% of the CPU processing power in your computer and 100% of the DSP processing power of the Carbon or the HDX card.
Yeah, I would completely agree that that's a fantastic piece of gear. Again, it depends on your facility. If you're working in a bedroom studio and recording only yourself, maybe you don't need that. But the Carbon and the Carbon preamp that comes with it now, the kind of expansion ride-on, is just awesome. It's really, really good.
Yeah, and by the way, just as a comparison here, Carbon is not an HD series interface, meaning you don't have to have Pro Tools Ultimate to run the Carbon. It runs fine on Studio.
One thing you will need, speaking about that specific product, it is AVB. So it connects to the computer in a way that's different from any other interface that Avid has. And so right now it's limited to Mac. Because unless there's an adapter that I'm not aware of, but there are a couple of AVB adapters that you can use with laptops and all that stuff. But right now, that is a connection limitation. It's just the way that interface was designed.
So when I read the comments for this, there was a lot of people saying, yeah, but Avid interfaces go out of date and they are useless after a couple of years and stuff like that. Is that really true?
No, well, it's a yes and no question.
Yes and no, I would say.
Every company's technology eventually will stop being supported because there isn't any reason for them to. It costs money to continually develop drivers. I've got a couple of Focusrites lying around here that are actually unsupported now on the current operating systems. Not necessarily unsupported by Pro Tools, as I think Anders will probably mention, it's unsupported by the operating system.
Yeah,
right?
If we look at some of the older Avid interfaces like the Digi 003, there is a limitation to what operating system you can use. Pro Tools would still run, for instance, the 003, but it's the version of your operating system that is the limiting factor. So Avid has basically stopped making new drivers for that interface because it was created 20 years ago or something. And the only way to be really, really sure that your interface will work in a couple of years is probably to buy a class compliant product which doesn't use a driver. There are class compliant interfaces that are basically up to the USB specification that don't require a driver. So if you buy, for instance, the SSL little 2-channel interface, it's class compliant interface, meaning you can connect it to any computer and it will just work automatically because it's a class compliant hardware unit. It doesn't need a separate driver.
Yeah, I mean, the person says, yeah, it's not supported. I've got this 003, and I'd love to know the year the 003 came out. Somebody wants to Google that, but it's been a long, long time, and it had a
2006,
early 2000,
2006.
So it had its day. It had good innings, and I think that I can't think of a piece of technology in the modern era that lasts forever and is eternally supported. It just doesn't exist. I mean, name your brand of interface. They have end of support deadlines, right? That if it hasn't happened already, it will, right? To whatever your year is going to go. You really only have two choices. One is to resign yourself and accept the fact that you're going to have to buy interfaces when they age out. I had an Avid Quartet by Apogee. Loved it. Fantastic. The fact that I got it for free made me love it even more. And it aged out. It wasn't supported. The driver wasn't supported. So now I had to get something else. And, I use that interface, regularly for a long time. So I can't complain. That's one way to go. The other way to go is to freeze your system, right? So there's nobody putting a gun to your head saying you have to buy and keep up to date with Pro Tools. If you like that interface and you want to keep that going, don't upgrade your OS, right? and just keep that system frozen. People do it all the time in our industry.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I'm familiar with a studio in Birmingham that's still running OS X Tiger.
Wow.
With HD8 because it's super solid. They don't need any of the extra stuff. I mean, my info is maybe about 6 years out of date. So whether they have changed, but at early 2000s, that's the system that they were running on, and it was because it was rock solid. They don't need any extra features. They just use it as a tape machine and a mixer, and it's perfectly fine.
People don't look at the right specs all the time. And so I guess I'm curious to learn from you guys. What spec do you look for first when you're shopping around for an audio interface?
I mean, for me, because I'm so heavily invested in this universe, I need it to be some type of HD interface because I need the ability to sync to the Sync HD or Sync X and adapt to film speed and things like that. So like that's the number one priority for me. And in the case of the current interface that I'm using, the Matrix Studio, it is a combination of having the features that I want to have, a lot of inputs and a lot of outputs to be able to output and monitor Dolby Atmos and things like that. But it also is, of course, all of that is great to have, but you can buy interfaces with a lot of inputs and outputs that still sound rubbish, right? So the value of the conversion and for me, the 2 preamps that are in the Matrix Studio sound fantastic as well. So it really sounds good, and that's exactly what I want to have.
How about you, Dave? What do you look at first?
So I'm not going to steal your thunder, because the thing that you want to talk about and are passionate about is a thing that I would look at, and I'm going to just say clock quality for one, but it's the cleanliness of the inputs and the sound reproduction. I want to be able to have confidence that what's coming out of the interface is going to be as close to what Pro Tools is producing as possible. So I don't want them to be colored. And because I use external pre's, I don't want any coloration going in either. So putting aside the fact that I would need to look at input and output numbers, and I use SPDIF as well for my Kemper input, so that would be a thing, but still covered under inputs and outputs. It's going to be more a case of making sure that the audio representation is going to be as accurate as I could find. Yep. But similar to Anders, I'm working in HD native, so for the studio stuff, I wouldn't be looking anywhere else other than Avid stuff. For the live, I think it would probably be more of a cost quality, a cost implication, for the live mixers that I use I work with, and it'll be a cost of the mixer and a cost of the stage boxes as to whether it's affordable. And those would be my primary factors for that specific thing. But then I'm not regularly or habitually connecting them into a DAW anyway,
right?
Other than to capture live shows.
Yeah, for myself, I feel like I'm at the lower end of the spectrum compared to both of you, because I spend most of my life without using my HDX system. I have one, but I don't use it as much because I don't need to. And Dave very kindly didn't mention what he looks at, letting me talk about it. There's one spec that you have to dig around for, but more than I think any other specification or measurement contributes to the cleanliness of the sound, and that is jitter. And jitter is a term that most people have heard, and sometimes they don't really know what it means. And I'll bottom line it real quickly. Let's say you're recording at 48 kilohertz. That's 48,000 samples per second. Are each one of those samples evenly spaced within that session? The answer to that question is almost. There's going to be slight imperfections in the timing of those samples. Jitter is a measurement of the deviation in regularity of timing. So you want the lowest jitter possible. You get that by having a high quality, very stable crystal clock within your interface. And that's what Dave said. He looks for clock quality. Yes, a host of problems are solved by having low jitter. You capture better, you're monitoring better, your low end becomes much more clear, and your stereo representation becomes much more reliable. I wish you could have the same kind of jitter specifications when people are listening to music, but that's out of our hands. But in the studio, we want to have the lowest possible jitter, and that is something I'm willing to pay for. Now, Avid has historically had really good clocks in their systems, from the HDIO to the Omni to all those interfaces, really solid clocks. The one that I think I'm most impressed with these days that is in that Avid ecosystem is the Matrix. The Matrix has really low jitter, and you can hear the difference immediately.
One thing we haven't talked about is Avid makes the interfaces, Avid makes the software, and Anders touched on it earlier on with the integration, the latency integration. It's kind of similar to Apple's Macs. Apple makes the hardware, Apple makes the software specifically to work with their hardware, which makes it very easy for companies to qualify whether software will work or not. And largely, it's not universal, but largely the OS X environment is an incredibly stable one because the software has been designed to work with the hardware, right? And it's going to be similar with Avid and Avid interfaces and Pro Tools. And if you look at Windows, having to deal with that myriad of component combinations and whether things will work efficiently, whether things will work properly, is always a toss-up on Windows. But with a Mac, we can always guarantee that at least when we open the system, it's going to work well. And I think we can probably agree that happens with Pro Tools and Avid interfaces. They're designed to work together.
Totally.
Absolutely.
Yep.
You stumbled on the number one point, right? Because Avid back in the day only supported Avid interfaces, right? So Pro Tools, Avid interfaces, those are the days of the M-Box. When we opened up the doors to third-party interfaces, then that control dissipated a bit. But the one thing that is Avid is going to test how Pro Tools works with Avid interfaces. Can we test how it works with every interface? It's not possible, right? That's why we have some supported interfaces, some that we don't know, officially not supported. You're kind of on your own there. But when it comes to drivers matching Pro Tools and being tested and vetted by the beta testers and all that, that is a serious advantage to keeping everything in the family of Avid, so that you have some peace of mind there.
So if you got a lot out of this video, hit the thumbs up. And if you haven't yet subscribed to our YouTube channel, please do so. It helps us. It helps our videos get out to Pro Tools users as well. And hit that bell icon so you get notified every time we release our new videos. If you head over to protoolsanswers.com, you can find out a little bit more about us over there. And you can also subscribe to our Inner Circle as well, which will get you some nice benefits, including monthly masterclasses with 1, 2, or maybe all 3 of us, and inclusion in our closed Discord Pro Tools Answers community. And so it's a lot of fun there, Anders.
It is, yeah.
Conversation is always really good. Some terrific people who are helping to support our channel. And thank you very much to all you guys for watching. We will see you in the next one. My name's Dave. This is Pro Tools Answers, and we're out.